Welcome back, everybody. I'm calling an audible, and I'm telling everybody straight up, this is going to be a different conversation, but I think it's truly going to be a healthy conversation. So let me kind of give some background, and then I'll introduce Stephen. We had scheduled a narrative interview back in January, and this happened. And so Stephen, basically, I'm going to kind of give away the details, and maybe I should cliffhanger it a little bit more, but we're going to give it away. But Stephen actually living in the Palisades, and the date of our interview was, I can't recall if it was exactly a day after or 2 days after the fires ripped through, and there was a lot of devastation that was going on, a lot of loss, a lot of challenges, a lot of instability. And so there was a lot of things that were happening. And just in the green room, we were talking about some of the things that have happened here in Michigan with our ice storms, which now is about 40, 45 days or so ago. But in our situation, we didn't have the extremity of the loss of homes, but we had the extremity of the damages, and people were without electric for almost 25 to 30 days. And so we were kind of sharing these things, and we're just talking like, okay, these are natural disasters that happen in our lives, that according to when we talk about narrative in our stories, we have perspective shifts and mind shifts. Well, natural disasters are things that come into our lives that force us to change our perspective of how the world operates. And so that's the direction that we're going into. And I know I'm kind of giving away a lot, but I also want to be clear, because I think this is going to be a great conversation on how do we handle that? How do we handle instability? How do we handle scenarios that come up that are beyond our control? And then what do we do to be able to try to rebuild our emotional stability, mental and physical stability? And how do we now rework our lives when they've been upended in such a catastrophic way? So with all of that introduction, Stephen, thank you for taking the time. And the one thing I can say is I really appreciate the fact that we were or have been able to reconnect now. What is it, 6 months later, 7 months later or so? We've kind of closed the circle on this, and I greatly appreciate you keeping up with that. So thank you for spending the time with us. Thank you for giving of your time, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, me too. I mean, Tim, it was an unfortunate situation on January 7th, and everybody that I knew that lived in the Pacific Palisades had to make a deep, deep pivot to
Mm-hmm.
how they were living life and what they were doing on a daily basis. So, you know, waking up on January 7th, roughly 5:30 a.m., 6 a.m., to have a coffee on the back patio with my wife, which is a routine that we have to watch the sunrise and kind of, be together before we move into a busy day. And by roughly noon that day, we were out of the house with a few items in our cars, trying to escape what was a very angry, angry, angry fire.
Yeah.
We literally, from the time we saw the first plumes of smoke on the back of the ridge behind our house to the time we were out, it was about 45 minutes. So you can
Wow.
imagine what goes on in the body, mind, heart, and soul, and even in the spirit when something like that's going down, because you think your day's going one way, and the next moment it's not. So
Well, and I
it
think
was a
let's
lot
let's
fast.
I was gonna say let's dive into that part of it, because I think that's going to be probably the situation, and just to kind of include and bring in. I have a friend, and we were talking about this in the green room. I had a friend that lives down in the southern Illinois area, and they had a massive, like 20 some tornadoes that came through about 2 weeks ago, and then they have we're still hearing word about the North Carolina area where the dam broke, and that was already, and people are still trying to recover from all of that. There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of natural things that are going on, but let's take that step back, because I know I lived through it. The concern, the worry, the demand on or I should say the emotional toll of having to go, now, like you said, 45 minutes from the time you saw it till the time you were out. What goes through your mind at that time? Is it, maybe nothing, maybe it's just survival and maybe your instincts kick in, but what literally happens in that time frame of where you are um, dealing with that intense danger, I guess would be the best way to put it.
Yeah, and so a great question. I'll answer it specifically, but contextually, what I'd love to add is, for any of your listeners, this could be a natural disaster, it could be a financial disaster,
Yep.
it could be a health crisis, it could be that you're going through a divorce, It could be that you walk into your business one day and you find out that somebody's been stealing money from you. So, whatever the crisis is, whatever the situation is, and what I experienced when I came off a business call at 11:30 a.m. on January 7th, go to the backyard. My wife's out there with her phone. I'm like, honey, what's going on? Well, there's smoke and there's a fire. The first thing, honestly, and I'm pretty well trained as a leadership guide. I have practices in my life that are very steeped in mental performance, emotional well-being, spiritual attunement. And I went blank, Tim. Like my brain literally froze. Like
Mm.
I was curious, like about that later, like what was going on. And it wasn't for a long time, but maybe 5 minutes. Like, what's the best thing to do? What are the things we take from our home? Do I turn on the water sprinklers? What do we do? So my brain just kind of went blank. And I was surprised about that. I didn't move right into action. Once I was able to sort of get hip with what was really going on, I could move into action and start to get some things together, important things together, like passports, computers, a few cherished items in our home. But that was about it. But the first thing that happened is my mind went blank, which I think happens with a lot of people when they're faced with something they don't see coming.
I would agree with that completely. It's an overwhelming, and I don't. The blankness, I think, maybe comes a little bit from disbelief. Like I never would have expected that to be the case, and maybe it's a betrayal, maybe it's like a natural disaster. But yeah, that blankness, I can totally see being part of it, and then not really understanding the breadth of. Well, that was our situation: is not understanding. My wife is out taking pictures of the ice on the trees because it's so beautiful, and then within 12 hours electric is going down, trees are falling, it sounds like gunshots, it sounds like a war zone because of how much stuff is breaking. And she was really concerned, but again, yeah, that blankness happens.
And I think, Tim, it's like a part of us and maybe a part of other people that have gone through these kinds of things, including you and your wife. It's like we I've always thought like it isn't going to be us, and I think my wife Veronica was the same. She was like, well, I smell smoke, I've been through this before, we can be on ready, we can be on, in fires they call it ready set go.
Yeah,
So we could have been on ready, but we really needed to be on set and go because it was moving that fast. But some part of us was in denial that it'll be our home, that it'll be that somehow the fire department, the helicopters, which were dropping chemicals and dropping water, it was happening so fast, Tim. Like I watched one flame with the winds kick up embers, and within 3 minutes, there were now 8 flames in the ravine behind our house. And within a few minutes, there was a fire in our backyard with embers coming in my back door.
yeah,
And so it's just getting our heads around that with a deep understanding of dismay, of upset, but also the adrenaline is coursing through your veins at that time to do what you think is the best thing to do in that moment.
yeah, yeah. So let's look at that and kind of hindsight digest or figure out what is the best method to prepare yourself. And maybe you don't, maybe you aren't able to fully prepare, but there are elements in that prior to an episode or prior to a betrayal or prior to anything where what are some things to strengthen our lives in order to try to prepare, and then we have to go through it.
Yeah, I think, overarching, uh, we're living in interesting times. Like, regardless of what your thoughts are on why, which I won't get into today, it doesn't matter why, but it seems to me these events are happening more and more. Like there just seems to be more natural disaster. There just seems to be a lot of upset in the world today. Interesting times. So I think preparation is a key.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we would have had just one box that was prepared, or even a list, Tim, of because in that moment, like I said, I see myself as a pretty capable guy, but
Right.
I wasn't thinking. My linear mind was literally like gone. And so if I'd have had a list of, one, two, three, four, five, including the dogs, like make sure I
Yeah.
got the dog, all these kinds of things that were going down, I think that in and of itself would have helped us to do better than we actually did in terms of being in a crisis and being in a literal war zone while we were getting out for safety. So two things: one, be prepared, and you do the best you can. You can never be fully prepared because you don't want to be focused on, oh, we're going to have a natural disaster and we know that's going to happen. But I think there's somewhere in between, a place where we make a choice, make a decision to get hip with the living reality of what's going on the planet today.
Yeah, and I would add to that too, and it's a so many times when I have hold interviews, so many times when I talk to whether it's men or women, I often ask about identity, and I ask who is Stephen, and I try to draw out where they actually place their identity. And the reason, excuse me, the reason why I'm bringing that up is because so often we'll see individuals that place an identity in what they own, whether it's a house or a car and so that becomes who they are. We've seen that in businesses. We've seen that where individuals will adapt the identity of a successful business or a successful practice, or even in what they do. If they're a nurse or a doctor, maybe they don't own the business, but they take on that identity. The reason why I'm bringing that up is in the aspect of setting priorities on things that are going to be long after we pass. And obviously, we know our houses and cars and possessions and material things shouldn't be our identity, yet that sometimes encapsulates who we are. And I think that's what you're getting towards, is that list of, okay, what are the things that are most important to me? What is the priority? What are the things that I want to preserve for a legacy or moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, what a great point. So, I'll just be 100% myself with you today. So, my identity is that I am a spiritual being having a human experience. But that does not mean that I am divorced from or deny that there are things that I love and
Yeah.
things that are important to me. So, one example would be, I would say to most people, well, I'm not a things person. But I'll tell you that my brothers, my stepfather recently, like within the last month, said, "Hey, are we going to Montana this year to fish the bighorn?" And I was like, "Of course, we got to go. We'll go in July, we'll set a date." And then I immediately dropped into some deep kind of grief because my sage fly rod and hundreds of flies that have been given to me, tied by my stepfather or friends of mine, uh, I've fished all over the world. I fished in New Zealand. I fished in Argentina with this fly rod. It's freaking gone.
Yeah.
And it isn't that I can't replace the sage rod. It's the memories. It's the moments. Like I remember one time security in Argentina tried to steal it, and
Mm.
I kind of had to fight to get it back. So there's all these beautiful memories and stories that we can have with things, and that's more than anything what I'm going to miss. I can't go to the garage and grab my
The
my
fly rod.
fly rod for my trip to Montana on the Bighorn in July. So those are just things we navigate, and I think those are things that are also beautiful, because when we love something, or we love we love some item, or we love something, it's really the memory that
I
we
love that.
love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a clear distinction, because too often, again, and there's danger in that, and I have seen that with some where they, their entire life is encapsulated by just trying to get more things and more things and more things. But yet there are definitely some things that hold distinct value because of the memory, not because of dollar amount, not because of how much it would be worth. I mean, it's a memory. It's something that we take with. It allows us to go back. There's a very, very strong principle that talks about leaving. I mean, back even 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, they used to build altars, and you still see them sometimes. There, you'll build a pile of rocks as a memory of the way that you went, or the path that you took, and those rocks were there intentionally so that the kids would ask, why is that rock pile there? What happened here? Why did we want to commemorate this area? What was going on? And it gives a chance for the kids. So I love that that correlation, or that combining of the item with the memory.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of irrefutable ideas and principles around this that obviously I've looked at since January. Now we're in
Right,
June. It's kind of like the metaphor of the artichoke, where we're peeling back layers to really get to the heart of the matter, and what does it really mean when your house gets burned to the nubs. And
right.
I've looked at it as a phoenix rising, kind of like what's going to happen from here, and what if there's some silver lining in this, what if there's some blessings in this. But overarching, most people would agree, regardless of what their thoughts and beliefs are, that most things are impermanent. Like, there isn't really permanence with much of what we have as things. All things eventually go back to ashes and to dirt.
Right,
They go back
exactly.
to
Yep.
nature, so to speak. But that's a journey from permanence to impermanence, and so to underplay that, to pretend like, oh, that happens in 24 or 48 hours is a bunch of nonsense, because we are people that, we work hard for a home, we work hard for the memories in that home, we work hard for a business, some of us work hard for well-being and ultimate well-being, and then we go to the doctor one day thinking we've done everything we can. And I've had friends that get a blood marker and they're like, crap, this isn't good, like this doesn't.
Yep.
So life is going to throw us these curveballs, and the deeper question I think you and I have been exploring together is, what do we do when that happens?
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, and we talked briefly about the fact that there is a certain amount of comfort and stability when you're able to step back into the house. There's that security of, this is a safe place. And when that's gone, it also shakes your emotion. And so now, again, leading back to that question, how do we get through it? How do we deal with it? What do we do on the other side of it? What are the things to be able to manage some of that grief? I know from some of the men that I speak with, it's a bottle it up, put it away, and never think about it again. And that's just as unhealthy as continual being in it. I mean, you have to experience it and heal from it. But so how do we do it? What's your process?
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up gender wise, because and I don't want to categorize this as just gender related, but let's just call it the masculine polarity.
Right.
Okay, so that we can keep it not gender specific, but the masculine polarity uh, tends not to do any vulnerability or grieving. And so I was aware during the first 30 days of what I call toxic positivity. And toxic positivity is like, you're 3 days in and someone writes to you or calls you and goes, "You're going to rebuild. You're going to be stronger than ever." And I'm like, well, how the frick do you know? Like, I don't know that right now. I don't have a home. I'm living in a hotel. I'm eating every meal in a restaurant, which I'm very grateful for, by the way. Like,
But
thank God for that.
yeah,
But I think that step one is you've got to get hip with what's really going on, and you got to feel the feels.
yeah,
Does that mean that you let your grief and your emotions take over? No, it means that you have the experience of what really happened, and that you find, and I think the worst thing a person can do, I'll pivot to that for a second, is isolate. Like, people that are
yes,
going through difficult times, if they isolate and try to deal with it by themselves, the mind can play tricks on us. And so I think first thing as a solution is to be with community, be with loved ones. And if you're a single person or a person that doesn't maybe live near a community, you've got to discipline yourself to reach out. You've got to share. You've got to connect.
yeah,
Connectivity is a solution during a hard time. And we saw that in the Palisades fire. Oh my God, Tim, we saw community and humanity come together like I'd never experienced in my life. And I've been through some other difficult things, but the way people came together, the way people supported, the way people called me and said, I must have had 100 places what we could have gone and stayed. It was crazy. Food, clothes. I got boxes and boxes of like Element, which is a mineral substitute, like a salt and mineral thing. Like, people thought, well, maybe he just needs some fortification in his water, right? I'm citing that because it was crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But we were in a hotel room, and within a week, it was filled with boxes of clothes, underwear, t-shirts, toiletries, food items. So the connectivity with humanity and our ability to reach out and ask for help is something most men don't do, and most human beings don't do, or most human beings could do better, including men and women.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of authenticity that has to happen, and that comes through that healing time. But as far as that process, it's interesting, and this has come up so many times. It's actually scary. But I'm reading a book. It's called Bowling Alone, and he goes through a study from 1970 to the year 2000 about how our communities have been disintegrating, and yet we see these examples like what you're just mentioning. We saw it here too. We had actually a year ago. We had a tornado that ripped through, and now locally we've been dealing with the ice storms. And my wife just mentioned this the other day. She's like, "This is going to be the summer of the chainsaw," because that's all we
Yeah.
hear every day out there. We hear chainsaws going all the time, and it's neighbors, but neighbors helping neighbors, and people are just. It's amazing to see when we do get in crisis how often so many people are willing to step up and help, and then how authentic people have to be in order to say, "Yeah, I need help." Raising that hand. Um, but let's go back because I think this is really important. You mentioned earlier, you said we need to make sure we put contextually the fact that it's not just the natural disasters, it's also when businesses happen or when something happens to your business, and whether that's a betrayal or you're going through a divorce or a death in the family. These all have the exact same principles or benchmarks to have to walk through. So when you're saying about the get real part of it, there's definitely a minor thing, but I've watched my son now who graduated leave the house, and that's a ending of a season for me and Melissa, and that's a closure. That's a time that ends, and I still feel the pain of the loss, even though I'm excited about what's going to happen. And you even kind of mentioned this just when you were talking about, okay, I'm dealing with the loss of the house, but I'm grateful for the hotel. I'm dealing with the loss of my things, but I'm grateful for the food. And like we kind of waffle back and forth between these two things. Can you speak towards that for a moment? Maybe I wasn't
Yeah.
clear too. I mean, I can kind of clarify it a
No, I
little
get
bit.
it. I get it. I think that change is inevitable.
Right.
And I think that as human beings, that uncertainty is inevitable. And I think that we love certainty.
Yes.
And but I would also say certainty is overrated. Like, and I don't want to pivot too quickly from the pain and the grief of what you're going through, what you've been through with the ice storms, what I went through, what we're still going through. So, grief has a life of its own. So, all I would say before we move on from that is that feel the feelings you have and don't be afraid to share them vulnerably. I think there's great strength in vulnerability.
Yeah.
And there's also great lessons in it. So I use in my work with leaders, I say, it's a very simple thing and it's powerful. It's like use everything that happens, and I capitalize everything, Tim. Use everything that happens for your advancement, your growth, and your learning. So if you can see through that lens, suddenly, we'll start to see, even in the worst situations, that we're not in control of a lot of things we think we're in control of. So there's a surrender and an acceptance to that. Like life moves on, and we want life to move on because life
Right.
is meant to be moving. So if we're stagnant, we die. So human beings are meant to be moving. We're meant to be in motion. Use everything for your learning, growth, and your advancement as you go along the way. You at some point you got to surrender to the reality of what's happening. And another, kind of flippant uh, phrase is all suffering comes from arguing with reality.
Mm.
So when something happens, it's happened. Can I change that the fire happened? I can't change that the fire happened. Could I have prepared better? Could I learn from it? Could I get greater wisdom from it? Can I develop deeper inner strength from it? Absolutely. All those things are real. And maybe that's why some of us go through pardon me, but the shit storms we go through, Tim, because maybe there's this like some learning and growth and advancement in that if we use it for our advancement. If we don't, we will use it what? Against ourselves.
Sorry.
I've seen, bless you, I've seen people divorced for 20 years and they're still suffering from the pain of the divorce from 20 years prior. I'm not judging that. I'm just saying that doesn't make for a very good life if someone's still in deep pain from something that happened 20 years before.
Yeah. There has to be in order for that. So, uh, point one, it was basically get real. Point two is surrender to the reality, because it was very clear as far as step one, step two, in that surrender to the reality. It's almost like we sometimes want to fight. And again, I've felt this in my own life with some of it. Is like I want to fight to get back to what it was, but yet it's never going to be what it was because it's just changed, and we have to be willing to realize the reality that things have changed and surrender to the fact that it's now going to be different. The point being is we cannot enjoy what we currently have if we're constantly fighting to get back to what it was.
Beautiful. I love that. I mean, we heard that a lot, right, in 2020. Again, no judgment, but we heard a lot in 2020. A lot of people in 2020, 2021 were saying, I can't wait to get back to normal.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, why? Why would we want to get back to normal? Maybe there's an up level from this.
Right.
Maybe we learned something from this. Maybe we learned how much we love community when we couldn't have it.
Right.
Maybe we loved so much going by a park and seeing young kids playing soccer without a mask on. Maybe we got a greater awareness from what happened so that we can learn and progress as a humanity. So I'm a fan of that, and at the same time, I'm not one to just skim over it. I'm not like
Exactly.
I was last night. It's interesting because we're up north of LA now in Santa Barbara, leasing a home with it's furnished, so we have a safe place to live through August now, Tim. But I came back down here, and I'm in LA today on business, and I made a purpose. You have to have a permit still to get up there. You
Oh,
have to have a
okay.
big red sheet of paper. The cops are still there. There's still armed guards there, the National Guard, because of the looting that was going on up there with the homes that were partially burned or the homes that were burned and people were stealing stuff from the backyards and everything like that. But I went up there and I went up there purposely because I wanted to feel, I wanted to be complete.
Right.
And I'm still not complete. I mean, I still had tears because I stood on what used to be our front porch and I watched the sunset from where we used to watch the sunset. So again, I'm back to the realization of our humanness
Yeah.
and that I think many of us try too hard to move on too fast. And I think we can learn more by not doing that and by keeping a balance between strategy and the emotional feelings that we have as we navigate hardship, whether it's a loss of a business or a loss of someone we deeply love or a fire or an ice storm.
Right. Yeah. I love that concept of allowing us to embrace our humanity, but yet still have the strategy. And so there's the combination of our emotions and our spiritual being, yet feeling that loss of what was. And so just moving through that, and it's difficult. It definitely, and I know that there's a lot of people even today struggling both in probably all over the United States as well as all over the world. What would you recommend their process be? Yes, we said about community. Yes, we talked about trying to make sure that you stay connected, but is there something that they can do personally to be able to try to start building back and trying to start healing from all of those disruptions in their daily lives or in the stability of their homes or the stability of where they're at?
Yeah, I think that um,
I'm challenging you.
there
I can see it. It's like these are these are different conversations, so it's good.
Oh, I love it. And I love that that's what we're doing, that we don't have some script or set question.
Yeah.
I think that a person, and what I do is I sit and I realize, this too is going to pass. Like this particular day, this particular week, this particular situation. And if you think back, all your listeners think back on their lives, and I asked the question, like when I was in intensive care back in 1991, 8 days of being in intensive care, thinking I was going to die at a very young age. And, you're laying there for 8 days thinking, this is, this is awful. This is going to ruin the rest of my life. It didn't do that. Changed the rest of my
Yeah.
life. I left investment banking because of those 8 days in intensive care and became a leadership guide to thousands of people throughout the world from that experience. So I think, a mindset, an emotional component, a spiritual belief, physical action steps that say, this is going to pass. This is a part of my life. It's not the entirety of my life.
Mhm.
So that I think is a really important mindset. And if you're having trouble with that, if you're just like, I can't see a way forward. This is so daunting for me. I can't get out of my own thoughts. I can't get out of my own sadness, my own emotions, my own grief. Again, get back to connectivity with other human beings. And I'll say it too. There's so much value in connectivity with nature. Like get your feet on the ground, get out in the early morning sunrise, watch the sunrise. There's such beauty in life that we miss when we're going through daunting hardship and we forget that we're not alone. And it's a remembrance, Tim, of I'm not alone. And it's up to me to reach out. It's up to me to get my feet in the dirt and go for that hike or get in the ocean or whatever the thing is that we love to do. But simple things like watching the sun come through an oak tree can often reconnect us with the idea, with the belief that this too will pass. Because nature what? Persists. Nature goes through winter and seasons and ice storms and fires. And when I was back up at the Palisades just last night, one of the things that brought tears to my eyes, buddy, is the green. Like the earth is moving again. There's fresh tree growth. There's gardens that are untended, but they're still growing. So this is the truth of our existence on the planet.
Yep.
These things will continue to rebirth. So we might feel like we're going to die. And sometimes I've felt like that, including being in the hospital for 8 days in intensive care. But there's often a rebirth from it, a rebirth from when we think we can't take any more. This is it for me. I can't go any further. We often find great inner strength from those moments with a faith and a trust that this too will continue.
For someone who can't see that, what's the best thing that you can say for somebody that believes? And I've heard this expression. They feel like they're in a dark room and they can't see the way out. They can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. They have very little hope for the future. And I love what you gave as far as the connectivities and being able to find and reconnect with nature. But if you were dealing with somebody that was at that point of giving up because they don't feel the hope, what would you say to that individual?
Well, first I would say I understand. And I'm going to pause. Like I have compassion. People look at me as a 60 something year old white guy and they tend to think, well, his shit has been fine. He was handed this or that. Not true. Not true. So, let us not ever make assumptions about what another person has dealt with because of a certain way that they look or the identity that they might have.
Right.
But I think, when I've been in dark places, usually the thought that I have is this isn't going to change. Nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares about what I'm going through. I've done my best. I give up. So that's a pretty dark place, right? And when someone's there, I would say you have got to find a nanosecond of trust and faith to reach out. If you can do that, and oftentimes people will do it, even people that are at the, I've had people. I hope this doesn't get too dark on your podcast.
No, you're fine. This is the reality of life. That's what we're about.
Reality. I have had people call me and say, I've got my gun loaded and it's cocked and I'm ready to end it all. I'm ready to end it. And I have said, can we talk? And it's not like I'm trying to talk them out of it. I'm just listening. Tell me what's going on. What's present for
Yep.
you? How are you feeling? And within 5 or 10 minutes, the gun's on the table and it's uncocked. And then it's like, can I come over and see you? So we have to open the veil between life and death, and we have to see through it. We have to have some level of belief, because people, Tim, that I've talked to that have actually gone through the act but didn't end their life, like they tried to end their life, it's minutes of consideration and that kind of thing. So as daunting as it can be, as awful as it can be, we have to have faith that this will pass. We have to,
Yep. Yep. I completely concur.
in my view. And I'm not an expert on this, believe me. It's just been my life and how my life has gone. And because of who I am, I get close to people and people feel like they can call in those moments.
No,
So
and that's the reality, and that's why we speak on this podcast. And we've always said this. This is genuinely our experiences. These are our stories. These are the narratives of our lives. This is what we live and breathe, and we all go through this. I would say too, one of the greatest false narratives that has ever been spoken upon society is the fact that we are alone. That is something that we see through social media. See it through media. We see it through all different aspects of communications. And the reality is, it's not true. And I think truly in our brains we know that that's not true, but yet we hear it so often that it just starts to embed in our hearts and becomes a belief. And again, a false narrative that we live through. So I just trying to break that. And like you said, sometimes it's a nanosecond of a belief or a faith or a little bit of hope that allows you to start communicating and talking, to be able to just break that thought pattern or that mindset that you have leading to a dark place. So I mean, it's good. It's absolutely good. That's exactly where we're at and where we need to go. Go ahead.
well, and Tim, I mean, you're nailing what I think is maybe the most germane and most important part of our conversation so far, which is you're not alone.
Yeah.
There's an illusion that we're alone, but we're not separate. You and I don't know each other that well, but here we are in a very deep, intimate conversation after really talking for just a few minutes in the green room before we went live. Like, we, because we're willing to be intimate, because we're willing to be vulnerable, we both can see immediately there's a lot of things that you and I have in common. So what we tend to do is we put labels,
Yes.
and we go, well, you're politically this, or you live in this zip code, or you have this as a profession. And we start, because of these labels, to separate ourselves from humanity. And when we get separate from humanity, we feel alone, and we get alone. And, this isn't helping a lot of
No.
people.
No. It's a phone. No. No.
This is my iPhone, and I use it as a tool, and I do dopamine detoxes because I'm pretty mindful about it. But this is not our greatest intimacy. This is a tool to be used to communicate and to gather information or whatever we use. But for a lot of people, this has become the relationship, the primary relationship that a person has. And I would be mindful of that. I would be
Yep.
mindful of that because this phone doesn't care that much about you. And we're going to have to be more important. I hope I'm not on a tangent,
No.
but
I
AI,
love this tangent. I think it's definitely the way to go.
I mean, AI is going to be, I think, incredible for so many of us if we use AI instead of AI using us. And there's a big difference there,
Mm-hmm.
big distinction there. So be mindful about humanity, be mindful about connecting to nature and connecting to other human beings, and stay in those connections.
Yeah.
Be willing, if you haven't practiced it lately, to be vulnerable
And
with
I
other
think
people.
I think the key is this: is we are trained to look for differences. We have to be purposeful in looking for commonality.
Yeah.
We as individuals have to be intentional and committed to finding it's easy for me to sit here and say, hey, I'm in Michigan and Steven's in California. And so we have very little in common. I mean, I'm surrounded by water. You guys have a lot of challenges with water. I mean, it's easy to start looking at all these differences, right? But
Right.
the reality is, I mean, we have a lot more in common than what we realize, and just some of the experiences are very similar as far as even some of the loss and some of the things that we're dealing with, whether and just just even in our own entire lives. So we have to be so intentional in looking for that. And then I personally believe by being intentional with finding commonality, you suddenly stumble into your community and you stumble into these relationships that all of a sudden are just now lifelines when you get into situations such as a disaster or a situation with your own personal life.
I love it. I think you've nailed a step, brother, like commonality and seeking commonality. What we tend to see in the world through media, what we tend to see online with social media is people doing what? Disagreeing with whatever the person said when there could be 1,000 things that's in common. But there's this, and then I think with that, this like get curious. Like I'll give you a quick example. I won't go into the details, but a former client of mine, very conservative, strong, fundamental Christian, uh, had a real charge about anybody that was homosexual. Like just couldn't imagine anybody being homosexual. So I said, why don't you go make friends with somebody that's homosexual and discover what's going on with that person? Those two men are friends to this day because there was a willingness to get curious, and we tend not to do that. Why? Because we're afraid. We're afraid our bubble might pop. We're afraid our belief system might pop. And so it's not me sitting here going, anybody else should do exactly that. What I'm saying is get curious and discover where you might have more in common with someone you think you hate because of some belief they have.
Well, and I would even add to that, it's okay if you don't fully agree with that individual. There's lots
Yeah,
of friends that I
exactly.
don't fully agree with the way that they're living their lives or doing
100%.
things. But that's okay. I can take the good and I can see the commonality that we live in. And I think that's a healthy thing too. We might only share little pieces and parts of connectivity in part of the community, and we may disagree on some of the topics, and that's fine. But too often we focus on those disagreements and then we divide based on those disagreements. So
Yeah, see, I don't, like I said, we don't know each other that well. But one thing I know about you already is and I'm sure there's things you and I would disagree on, but we could talk about them.
yeah,
Like I know that about you. Like I could hear your point of view, and I might not agree with it. You could hear my point of view. You might not agree with it, but why would it mean we can't be brothers?
right,
Why would it mean we can't somehow do something together like
yeah,
this? You know, I mean,
100%, one hundred
so
percent,
I think we've nailed in that short period, last 3 minutes, what's required to reconnect.
yeah.
And it involves curiosity and seeking commonality, which is your word, which I'm going to steal. That's a great, like, what do we have in common? And because the world is looking at what's different about us, where do we disagree? And then we're going to argue about it. And then we're going to separate each other further. And then we're separate from what? Humanity.
Yep.
We're separate. And the worst thing, because I have degrees in spiritual psychology, the worst thing is we're going to separate from ourselves. And when we separate from ourselves, we can't go through any challenges or hardship. One of the great things about the fire was it brought everyone in my world even closer
Yeah.
because we didn't separate. We came together.
Yeah. I mean, man, we could go down a rabbit hole with some of that and their own personal separation and the fact that so many people live with guilt. And I mean, but we probably have to save that for another day because that's probably where we have to go. And I want to give you the opportunity because I do this with everybody, but out of all the things that we talked about, what would you hope would be the one thing that somebody walked away with? Regardless of anything else that we said, what would be the one most important key piece of information or advice or recommendation that you would have for those that are listening? What's that one thing?
That everything that's happening in your life, your business, and your relationships is for your greatest advancement if you can give it time to breathe and you can give it time to integrate and you can look back on it and see this grew me.
Hmm.
This made me a better woman. This made me a better man. It made me more compassionate. It made me more humble. Um, Anybody I know that's been willing and had the courage to go through these kinds of challenges we're talking about and and stick with it
Yep.
will look back, as I have in my life, I think you would agree, and go, oh my God, that was hard. I would never want that for anybody else. But look what happened with me. I'm
Right.
better for it. If I use it for my advancement,
Right.
if I use it against myself, it's just going to be used against myself.
Yep.
I'll never recover from it.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I know you do a lot of coaching and consulting and things, especially in the world of leadership. And while we didn't talk about that, I think there's so many foundational aspects of what we did talk about that do apply throughout all of your career, your work that you do. If somebody was interested, how would they get in contact with you? What would be the best way? Is it a website? Is it LinkedIn, social? What's the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, the best way is my website, which is just simply McGhee, MCGHEE, leadership.com. And from there, Stephen with a PH McGhee. I'm out there and I've done some things, movies, books, programs called the L4. It's all out there for people to look into if interested.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we'll get that in the notes. So if you're listening, you'll be able to hear or actually go back to the notes and find the link. Again, thank you, man. This has been honestly refreshing for me personally to be able to talk to somebody. And I've had a couple of these conversations that you walk away from and you're just like, I enjoyed that. It was really, truly soul refreshing, I guess would be the best way to put that. So thank you again for taking the time.
Well, Tim, thanks for what you're doing in terms of serving humanity with the compassion you have and the thoughtful nature of your questions. We have synergy today, which helps.
Yeah.
It helps a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And for those listening, again, we'll put this up on YouTube so that way you can kind of see some of the things that we do in the screens that you don't necessarily get to have a chance to see if you're listening to the podcast. Encourage you to reach out. And again, I'm going to say this too, and I usually try to say this every time, but there's sometimes I feel it more than others. And I would say this: if you or something was touched that we said that resonates with you, and you made a change, or you feel alone and you want to reach out, make sure you do, because we are here to be able to listen. We're here to help. We're here to be able to encourage and bring back some of that hope that maybe you feel is completely lost. So I encourage you either to reach out to myself directly, Tim Kroll, or reach out to Stephen McGhee. Either one of us, and I'm sure I'm speaking for you, Stephen, but I'm sure that he feels exactly the same way, in that our goal is to be able to help and encourage. So until the next time, keep writing, crafting, and building your narrative, because each is valuable. You have a story to tell, and it does have value for the rest of humanity.
Perfect. Thank you, Tim.